New cards from Karazhan revealed. We've got 7 of them to show today. So it looks like Karazhan has a bit of a chess theme. We found the class that gets the pawns, which is the warriors. At first, I looked at this card and I was like, wait, this is Unleash the Hounds, except they don't have charge. What's the point? And then I saw that they had taunt. Hooray. Taunt is worse than charge. There is some potential to get the bolster in with it, but that seems extremely bad. So anyways, my quick instinct on this card is it's quite bad. Also, from kind of a theory perspective, I think Blizzard is nimble enough to know which classes are best right now, and they chose to give an interesting but perhaps bad card to Warrior. That's a good move because Warriors have so many decks right now. Babbling Book. Question: why wouldn't you just put in the random Mage spell to your deck? Answer: perhaps you already have 2 copies of that spell. Question: are you willing to risk getting one of so many bad Mage spells into your hand? Answer: probably not. Question: why was Web Spinner put into Hunter decks when you got random beasts to your hand? Answer: because Houndmaster existed. Question: is a 1-mana 1/1 a good enough reason to risk getting a bad Mage spell? Answer: unknown. Question: why is Web Spinner okay? Isn't a Mage spell better than a beast? Answer: I suppose that beasts are always cards that you can play, and they can always be Houndmastered, I suppose, and you can always activate a kill command with them. So why isn't this card Web Spinner? Basically because you are much less likely to be able to get something good, I think. But hey, maybe it's good enough as a tempo play. We'll see. Malchezaar's Imp. 1-mana 1/3, and it's a demon, so hey, maybe a Zoo card. Now, the main problem with Zoo is that when you were playing your Doom Guards, you tried to have an empty hand. But hey, this is a card that opens up the potential for a new type of Warlock deck. There's some discard mechanics out there right now. Darkshire Librarian, we've got Soulfire, we've got Doomguard, and it's very cheap, and the stats are good. It's 1-mana 1/3. Got the Tiny Knight of Evil, you've got the Fist of Jaraxxus, they've got Dark Bargain. Discard deck? Discard deck? I think you need a little bit more than just Malchezaar's Imp before such a deck is viable. But this is an interesting direction, and I look forward to seeing if there are any more cards that interact with this discard theme. For now, I think this card is bad, and will not compete with Zoo. And it's not like you would put in the cards that discard cards, just because you have Malchezaar's Imp. You need like a few more bonus discards so far. Kazham! Be our guest, be our guest. You've got the Candle, Broom, and Teapot. Probably the first card that looks good with Cho'Gall. You can cast it proactively as opposed to as a response. Fun card! Looks cool. Stats aren't bad, you're getting 6/6 with stats for 5. And yet, Silverhand Knight is probably the card that you compare it with. Instead of getting the 4/4 from the Silverhand Knight and the 2/2, you're gonna have 3/3 Teapot and a 1/1 Candle. I think that it's not that unlikely to see this card see some play in Reno Lock, especially since you play it with Cho'Gall. It is basically Force of Nature, which isn't being played, but one could argue that Force of Nature is not impactful enough, but in Warlock you don't have to have cards that are as impactful, and Warlock loves having a lot of guys out because you can buff a bunch of guys. It's probably too slow for Zoo, and I think the only way we're gonna see Kazham see play is if Cho'Gall becomes a thing, and then you put this in the Cho'Gall deck, which is probably gonna be Reno also. But I think there's a decent chance that Cho'Gall becomes a thing someday. Wyrm. It's very similar to Stampeding Kodo. You're aiming at a certain number of attack or less. So for 6 mana, you're hoping to get something like 6-8 of stats, probably, since Boulder Fist Ogre isn't being played. This card is 5 stat understated. That said though, if you kill like a full health, good 4 mana card, which has 3 attack, then you're getting an extra 8 stat value because you're killing their 3/5. And there's a good amount of 3/5s out there. And it's targeted. And it's a dragon, unlike Kodo. So here's a list of cards that you can hit with Wyrm that you can't hit with Kodo. Plus, with Kodo, you always have the problem, like sometimes it's a 50-50, you hit their 1/1, or you hit their Imp Gang Boss. With Wyrm, you're always hitting their Imp Gang Boss. You can kill the Kodo, you can kill itself. Violet Teacher, SI7 Agent, Earthen Ring Farseer, Zeril. I'm kind of thinking of each class at a time. Aldor Peacekeeper, Vandrel Staghelm, Twilight Guardian, Elise Starseeker, Fairy Dragon, the Monkey, Alakir. It kills basically all Dragon Warrior minions, it's true. The Water Elemental. I think that Hibbler will be very pleased by this card, and of course it activates your Blackwing Corruptors and your other Dragon Synergy cards. It's meant for more of a control deck because it's responsive. Maybe Dragon Warrior sees you play Wyrm instead of Draconid Crusher? Maybe? Anyways, looks like a great card. I wonder when new Dragon Synergy cards will come out, because Blackrock Mountain will rotate out of standard at some point. Moroes. 2 words, Ravaging Ghoul. Now here's some good news. The theory behind Moroes is that you're getting a free button press every single turn in any class that isn't Paladin. And you know, when I play Paladin, I love pushing that button. And the button costs 2 mana. That means for 1 investment of 3 mana, you are pushing that button every single turn. That is a huge mana savings. Any class can now be Paladin. If you would have pushed the button like 10 times in Paladin, you just saved yourself 17 mana. As long as it doesn't die to a very common card like Ravaging Ghoul. And it is stealth, which means your opponent can't target with anything. So it'll stay there forever, asterisk. But yeah, I like the idea of power word shielding it. That's probably the best way of doing it, because you don't really want to buff Moroes since you don't really want to unstealth him. It's very similar to Dreadsteed, which was a 4 mana 1/1, just came back to life each turn. Moroes is kind of like Dreadsteed. Moroes, though, is arguably even better than Dreadsteed in this perspective, because your stewards can stack up. So instead of only having 1/1/1, you can have like 5 stewards at one point or another. I think people look at Moroes and just dismiss him, and I think that is a mistake, because this card is beautiful. And when you're looking at new cards, you have to see the beauty in all cards. The card doesn't suck. It's actually statted very aggressively. Basically what I'm saying is, for Moroes doesn't die, the return is pretty good. And hey, at its very worst, it's like a 3 mana 2/2, because you're getting the 1/1 and the other 1/1. The only reason why we're calling it incredibly bad is because Ravaging Ghoul is in the meta, and like 35% of people are playing Warrior. Not an exaggeration, according to recent stats. And that's probably enough reason to call it bad. But hey, I'm just saying that it's got some potential. And finally, Prince Malchezaar. We've got a demon. It is the same stats as Pit Fighter. When game starts, make your deck worse is the text. There have been some comparisons with Elise Starseeker, which are, okay, when you play your Elise, you are also basically making your entire deck legendary. And Elise is being played, so that means Prince Malchezaar is great, right? But therein lies the flaw. Elise Starseeker is included in decks, despite being a 4 mana 3/5, because she lets you cycle your useless cards away. It's specifically meant for the control versus control matchup. You typically don't want to get random legendaries in your deck, but some cards are so bad in a matchup. For example, Brawl is really good against decks which have a lot of minions in them, but in the control v control matchup, your Brawl is sometimes really bad and pointless. So when you can transform that useless card into a random card, that's actually good. When you're playing Priest, your cards are all pointless, so you can transform those cards away into useful cards. Prince Malchezaar has a problem of, like, you just have like a 9 mana 8/8 in your deck now. Oh, you just drew it, that sure sucks. You see, and this requires a little bit of history into deck building and card games in general. You want to have as little of deck size as possible because you want to build your deck with good cards in them. The question then is, why wouldn't you just put those legendary minions into your deck in the first place? And then there's the also question of, why are you playing a 5 mana 5/6? It's a really cool effect, but it's pretty bad. This is actually a drawback, which means that the card probably could have been a 5 mana 6/7, and then it would be interesting. A random legendary minion is usually bad. Just look at like the list of bad legendaries you can get for a moment, and you'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. Anyways, people are just like, whoa, legendary, but this card is really, really bad. Although, if your deck is really, really bad, Prince Malchezaar will probably improve your deck. So you have that going for you. So step 1, build a terrible deck. Step 2, put Prince Malchezaar in it. You have improved your deck. Perhaps the most common argument against this card, and the way that I've slammed it, would be, what if you put it into a fatigue deck? Isn't 35 cards better than 30 cards? Okay, there you might have a small point. You theoretically save 5 + 4 + 3 + 2 + 1 damage if you both draw the same amount of number of cards. Probably the main problem with that, though, is that, 1, you're playing a fatigue deck. I don't think the tools are there for it right now. 2, well, that's basically it.